Timothy Tardibono. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy for Connect. We're going to go ahead and get started. There's, I think, a few more people filtering in, but we want to get going. Any of you that are Twittering, we have some hashtags up. Some of you may not be familiar with Connect. Connect is an organization in San Diego that helps startup and emerging companies grow. We help them with everything from securing their intellectual property to helping them find funding, whether it's through angel networks or venture capital networks. We've been at this about 30 years, coming out of the University of California, San Diego's Tech Transfer Office, and now we work beyond university research with everything. Most recently, Governor Cuomo mentioned us in the State of the State for New York address. Because New York City is trying to think through how do they develop innovation ecosystem like we have in San Diego. Now, you wouldn't think New York City needs that, but although New York City has some of the building blocks of an innovation ecosystem, what they don't have is that connection and that network. And that's where Connect comes in to help them think through how do they put these pieces together. In 2010, the U.S. Department of Commerce recognized us as an innovative program in regional innovation clusters. And fortunately, in San Diego, what's, I think, unique about San Diego is not only are we a mature innovation ecosystem, but we're a diverse innovation ecosystem. And it all starts with our core, which is our research institutions. Going back over 100 years, where that research base started, we now have over 80 research institutions. And what we're finding now is that these research institutions are coming together to collaborate in consortia, giving each of them giving different assets into a new research pathway with different assets coming together to advance joint and shared research. We have a long history of being a military town, and defense and cybersecurity is a big part of our innovation ecosystem. We have some of our leading IT companies, Qualcomm. Pretty much everyone's phone has a Qualcomm chip helping do the processing, but we have wireless and software to go along with that. We are known as a life science hub. A few in the country. We're one of the leaders, and we have with us one of the companies that's presenting is Life Technologies. They're up there at the top. We are, because of the sun and the great weather, we have a growing energy and environment, clean tech, clean energy, green energy sector. And our most recent sector is the sports innovators. So we have surfers, skaters, cyclists, who have figured out that they can make a better surfboard, a better skateboard, a better helmet, better shoes, and they're all into different kinds of new companies. And they've realized it's not just about them having fun in the San Diego surf and sand and mountains, but it's also about them being able to create a company that creates jobs and have fun doing it. And then now we have a growing sector of convergence where we have things like wireless health. Forbes, in an article last year, recognized us as the leading wireless health hub in the country. Sorry, those of you that are representing Silicon Valley company members. And we have bioinformatics and genomics, which we'll be talking about today. Biofuels, where our life sciences and our clean energy are coming together. And then autonomous robots and drones. And then most recently, we're starting to really work with our supply chain and our manufacturing companies that can help support these startups to keep them here and not go overseas. There's starting to become more of an awareness in the manufacturing community that maybe the China outsourcing was fool's gold. Everything isn't really turning out as great as people thought it would. And so companies are wanting to come back, and we're developing our manufacturing and our supply chain network so that we can keep our startups in Southern California and not lose them to China. Now, why does all that matter to you all as to San Diego's diverse economic innovation economy? Well, we did a study looking at the jobs in San Diego and the tech jobs. And as Congress and the Senate are looking at what do we do to get the economy going, what are the kind of jobs and the kind of companies we want to create, we'd argue that you should really be focused on the tech sector, and here's why. In San Diego County, our tech companies represent only 6,000 which is about 5% of the total San Diego companies. They make up 10% of the employment in San Diego County, but the last figure is an important one. They make up 25% of San Diego County's payroll. And so if you look at that as it goes for wages, on the left, over here to my left, you have the different tech sectors and their average wages, and then over there on the far side you have the average tech sector for San Diego engineer, scientist is over 100,000. The non-tech sector wage is 49,000. So you have a doubling effect of the wages. And so we'd argue if you all are looking to create jobs, you should focus on tech sector jobs, because that is not only going to provide growth to the innovation ecosystem, going to provide new products that can change people's lives, but it's going to create jobs and it's going to strengthen American competitiveness. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce a special guest, our own congressman from San Diego. He's a freshman. He's on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, which we're happy to be in one of their hearing rooms. And I'd like to say, as an organization that deals with Congress, when a new member gets elected, you're always watching to see how do they do and how long does it take them to get up and running. We've been fortunate that Congressman Peters started by assembling a great staff that got himself up and running. And then he was very assertive about going to the innovation ecosystem, those diverse sectors that I talked about, and getting to know each of them. And then the real test is, what does he do with that knowledge and that learning? And then he's already started translating that into action through his votes, through his bills he's introduced and stuff like that. So we from Connect in San Diego really want to thank you for the effort you've done. And if you all would give me help introduce Congressman Peters with a nice round of applause.
Thank you and good morning. And all that talk about San Diego made me homesick. I decided I'm going to get on a plane and go there today. Well, thanks to everyone for coming, and thanks for the invitation to say a few words. Welcome to our little piece of San Diego. If you've been around the Hill and you've heard me talk, I've always talked about what drives our economy. Tourism is part of it, so we hope you'll come visit and have a great time. But also the military is about a quarter of our jobs, and then we have this technology sector that's very exciting. And I think one of the things that we have a challenge in doing here is explaining to a place like DC how it works. In my observation, DC is a very small C conservative culture. And in places like in California and in these other, in San Diego, we tend to be collaborative, cooperating people. We sit around a table, try to think about how to solve tomorrow's problems. And a lot of good ideas come out of California. We're going to need to be responsive to those kinds of things. Not just California, but that's where I'm from. We're going to be responsive to that to understand how we compete in the world economy going ahead. So a couple things I'm working on. One is I really believe strongly in the importance of the government committing to basic science research funding. We have the Salk Institute in our area. I went to talk to them about science funding when I was a candidate, and they couldn't fit enough people into a conference room because they heard that someone who might be in Congress was coming to talk to them. And they explained it this way: it takes till you're about 40 years old to get that lab where you can compete for that grant. It used to be about 25% of those grants were funded, and these are the smartest kids in class. They're all competing against each other. 25% of those, so 75% weren't funded, and those were the good times. Today we're funding about 7% of those grants. And once you get that grant, then you might make a discovery that could lead to a cure for a disease or an idea that would become a company, like Qualcomm became out of a federal grant. And if we don't continue to provide adequate and consistent funding for science, what's going to happen is those kids who are the smartest kids in the world are going to look other places to do their science. They're going to say, well, I don't have to do that here. I can go to China, I can go to Singapore, I can go to Israel, I can go to England. I'm going to go to one of these places where they're going to fund my science. I'm not going to try to sit around here and hope. And that's very important for us because we have an edge in science that we don't want to lose. And it's out of that basic research that these great ideas come that have built things, built this great healthcare industry that we have. But also in other areas, federal research developed the internet, GPS, like I said, wireless, all things that were commercialized by the government, but were founded on basic scientific research. That's very important for American competitiveness, a real priority for San Diego and for the United States. The other thing is, once we make these investments, we need to get out of the way of people who are making these creations, and I just offer two examples. One is we tax medical devices as part of the healthcare bill, and we don't just tax profits, it's an excise tax, so we tax sales. So the very people who are starting up with great innovations in devices, inventions that might save healthcare costs, are the ones we're hammering right at the beginning as they get started. We've got to get out of the way. The other thing is FDA approvals are still too slow. We find that many United States inventions are available in Europe 3 to 5 years earlier than they're available here. And so, they're also human beings in Europe. There's something about testing that must be adequate over there that we could adopt here just to make things go more quickly. So you're all going to be a part of a very important inquiry. The final thought I'd leave you with is this. Everyone even heard of a slide rule before? It's a slide rule. So your parents, who are my age, had to use a slide rule, which was this thing that you slid and you had a little clear thing. I don't remember what it was, but it did all the calculation functions that you needed in 11th grade chemistry. When I was in the suburbs, my dad's a minister. We didn't have a lot of money, but one day in my chemistry class, a kid walked in with a $400 Texas Instruments calculator. Could do all the stuff my slide rule did. It was a lot easier. And there was a big discussion. He was not allowed to take that into the test because no one else could afford a $400 slide rule. Today, you all have all those functions on your smartphone. Or if you wanted to buy a separate calculator, it costs about 20 bucks and has one of those little solar panels on it. It's made out of plastic. You lost it, you wouldn't be worried. And what that shows is it's one example of where innovation has driven down the cost of something. It was a great innovation when it started, but it was innovation that drove down the cost. And we don't think about what might happen in healthcare in the same way. So what innovations in healthcare might drive down the cost of delivering healthcare? In Washington, I just want you to notice this, Washington thinks of healthcare as an accounting problem, where we have to pay for this much, so let's reduce reimbursements, raise taxes and fees. But we don't ever think about reducing the cost. And here's an example coming out of San Diego, and you'll hear more from Life Tech today. Qualcomm's doing wireless medicine. So imagine if you have a diabetic at home and you could monitor his glucose levels over the smartphone. Or you have a cardiac patient and you could watch her heart behavior over the smartphone. It saves the cost of an office visit. It saves the cost of an ambulance ride, and potentially an ICU care, because you have that data immediately available. Or I saw technology yesterday where someone my age who's looking after elderly parents could have on an iPad all of your parents' health data, so that when you take them to the doctor, there's no mistakes. Saving money, providing better care. All those things are open to us as innovations, but they're probably things we have to start spending a little bit of money on today, investing to get that return. And again, I'm asking you to push Washington on that. One of the problems we have is the way something called scoring. You heard of the CBO scoring? The CBO only looks at what something costs. It doesn't look at the return down the road. Now, no human being would ever do that, right? But that's the way our government looks at it. So it's a rigid, small c conservative culture that to compete and to overcome, we're going to have to take advantage of innovative strategies, the kind of things we do in San Diego, but also happens in Boston and San Francisco. I'm asking you to be open to that in your jobs, because this is an important fight. It's an important problem to solve, and we have some great new technologies and opportunities. And I thank you for your attention, and thank you for inviting me, and good luck to you all. Hope it's a great day. Thanks.
Well, and we're fortunate because we have both a San Diego and a Cambridge, Boston, Massachusetts company. So I'll go ahead and call Carol Cox. Carol's with Life Technologies, and there's information on your flyers, bio, and then after that we'll have Jerry Conway from Foundation Medicine come up.
Okay. Great, thanks, Tim. And Thank you, Representative Peters, for showing up today and stealing most of my thunder. I think he pretty much covered everything I'm going to cover today, but probably better than I will. Really excited to be here, and I want to thank Connect for inviting us. We are very, very committed to innovation. I'm one of the lucky few that actually gets to live in San Diego and work for a really incredibly big breakthrough company. So I'm going to run through some things today. I'm not a scientist, so I'll start with that. So if we have really deep technical questions, I have some colleagues here who can help me with that. What I want to talk about and cover today is some of the really breakthrough things that my company, Life Technologies, is doing in genomics, some of the economic benefits that we've already seen from what we call the DNA economy, jobs that have come out of there, out of research funding, out of the Human Genome Project. And then we'll finish up with some of the barriers that we have and some ways that I think we would look to ask for help from folks here who could actually help do what Representative Peters said, which is help us actually reduce the cost of medicine, because we have some incredible products that can actually help do that. So we're doing more with less, and I'll talk about that as well. So for those of you who may not know who Life Technologies is, we're headquartered out of Carlsbad, California, which is up north of San Diego. We are about 10,000 folks strong, global company, 180 different countries we operate in, and we make about 50,000 different products. That's an incredibly large number of products, and a lot of our products, if any of you are in the research area or you've worked in a lab, you'll know who we are, or you'll know some of the predecessor companies that we've acquired, in Vitrogen, molecular probes, some other pretty well-known names in research that are used in biotech and pharmaceuticals. So it's really pretty amazing. We sell most of our products in the United States, but are getting, like other companies, increasingly more global as we sell around the world. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are a researcher either in pharma or biotech or any other kind of academia, you're probably going to know Life Technologies, because we're in 90% of the labs around the world. Where there were some pretty incredible companies like QIAGEN, Sigma-Aldrich, and Thermo Fisher, some of the other big research tools companies. And then we'll talk a little bit about DNA. I like to call it the book of you. You know, that's really back in 2003 when the Human Genome Project finished up. What they did was they sequenced the first human genome, and so we learned so much about cells and chromosomes and genes, and what we've been able to do with that has really been quite incredible. Folks are probably pretty familiar with the Human Genome Project back from 2003. And that was a really great example of where you got the government was funding this. They did it, and then in conjunction with private industry, built up an entire industry. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that's reverberated through and how many jobs it's created, how much actually money it's created into the economy. And if you look over on the right-hand side, it might be a little hard to see from here, but it talks about the declining cost of sequencing, and Life Tech has really been integral in that. But I think when they did the human genome, it was probably about $100 million to sequence at that time, right after 2003, to get one genome, and now you can do that about $3,000 to $5,000. So incredibly, so you're getting the same amount of information for an incredibly smaller amount of money. And that's to what the congressman said, that's a way that we can actually help save money for the economy. So this is kind of interesting, and the products on the bottom are all products that Life Technologies has participated in, and on the top we'll talk a little bit about the technology industry. And the reason that's important is because sequencing used to be done in a very different way. At the bottom, the CE/Sanger sequencing was what they call a capillary electrophoresis, which is a different technology than what we're doing today. And on the far right-hand side is our ion semiconductor sequencing. So for most folks here, you probably are familiar, you probably grew up with semiconductor chips. You have them in your phone, you have them on your computers. It's incredible. And I'll pass this around. This is our Proton 1 chip. What's amazing is millions and millions of wells on that chip. And we can, this one we're not ready, this chip does not sequence your whole genome yet, but it sequences a very good large part of that. And it can do it within a day's period of time instead of weeks or months that it would have taken just probably 5 years ago. And what's incredible about that is we're really able to leverage semiconductor technology. So back in late 2010, we purchased a company called Ion Torrent. And they had been starting this work, Jonathan Rothberg had, using semiconductor technology. And it has really, really revolutionized the game of sequencing, and it's part of what's been able to bring that cost down. I mean, think about it. When you buy your phone, the next phone you buy is probably less expensive. You buy a flat screen TV today, you buy it 5 years from now, same TV, better quality, and probably for the same amount of money, if not less. So we're leveraging that kind of technology to do what we're doing. So when you think about it, and I don't have my iPhone on me, it's in the audience or in my purse, but you think you had big mainframes, then computers, then laptops, and now iPhones that do pretty much the same amount of work. So pretty incredible stuff. So we're leveraging that. Oh, and I know, I forgot one thing here. The Proton here, it's here on the right. We sponsored an exhibit this year. It happens to be pretty, if you follow DNA or if you're at all interested in it, it's a pretty incredible year. This 2013 is the 10th year of the human genome. It was done in 2003, and it's 60-year anniversary of when they first discovered DNA. Dr. Watson and Dr. Crick did. So pretty incredible. Over at the Smithsonian, we've helped sponsor an exhibit about the Human Genome Project. So if you get over there, it's pretty cool. It's called Unlocking the Genome Unlocking Life, and it's pretty incredible to walk you through all the different ways and what DNA is put together and how you get to be you, that book of you. So check it out if you have some time this summer. You may know who this guy is. He's Gordon Moore helped found Intel, and this is a little bit what I was talking about earlier, Moore's law, that basically this idea that over every 18-month period, the numbers of transistors on an integrated circuit will basically double, so meaning you're getting exponential throughput. So this is the technology that we're using in the chip, and we use on our PGM and our proton instruments. Same idea here, basically being able to leverage this technology. So you've got transistors. Back in 1979, you had 29,000 transistors for $125. You fast forward to today, and you're getting 1.4 billion transistors for $325. Same thing with your camera, the amount of pixels that you'll get. I used to be very interested in photography and had a couple of really nice cameras, and now I mostly just use my iPhone, because really, for the most part, it's much better than most of the cameras I have and not nearly as heavy to lug around most of the time. So these are the kind of things that we're using, and so these chips, like the Proton that's going around, when we introduce a chip, and we've got a number of these that have higher throughput, every time we introduce the next chip, the other chip gets less expensive. It still does the same amount of work, and our researchers can use it, but we charge less money for it. So I mentioned this earlier a little bit about the DNA economy, and it's a term that we've kind of coined, and some other people in the industry use it. But what we're trying to show is that in the world of DNA, there is out of the Human Genome Project, again, a great example where you had the federal government actually working in a way that I think is, again, going back to what Congressman Peter said, funding things that can actually help industries. You know, small biotech companies, and LifeTech isn't small anymore, but it started off as a very small company, can't afford to do some of this work in the beginning. Either you don't have enough money, or you're a publicly traded company, so you have to be careful about how you spend your money, or you're looking to venture capitals to help support what you're doing. So if the government is able to actually go in and bring billions of dollars, in this case what they did with the Human Genome Project, and fund scientists to do this kind of work, what ultimately ends up coming out of this is a huge support for the economy, because it spurs industries. I mean, now there are probably there's 3 or 4 companies in San Diego alone who are doing sequencing, and there are many around the globe who are doing this and working. And so what you found out of this is just in that Human Genome Project, it was about $14.5 billion that the government gave. You've actually had $1 trillion in revenue coming back into the economy. So there was a Battelle report that you may have heard about that was done a couple of years ago, and then there was just an update. So third-party economic analysis of what that Human Genome Project actually brought to the economy. So $1 trillion in cumulative economic impact. So 53,000 direct jobs, or another 100,000, so well over 150,000 indirect and direct jobs that were actually brought into the economy, and about $293 billion in personal income. And to the chart that Tim showed earlier with Connect, I mean, even at LifeTech, we have probably about 2,000 employees based in Carlsbad. Vast majority of those folks are R&D who are making good salaries. They come in, they help the economy, they buy groceries, they go do entertainment, they have things with their family. So it really can see where that comes back and plays into helping out. It's also, and Jerry will talk more about this, about the interaction with medicine and how we're going to be trying to do using gene sequencing to actually come and target drugs better, so the treatment is better and more effective. And then in our business as well, we do a lot of testing around food and animal safety. It's kind of hard to open up the newspaper and not see an E. coli breakout or something else that's going on with their food. Those are products that we can use, that we sell, that actually will help do that and actually prevent serious injuries. And so let's just talk a little bit about what we see out over the next couple of years that are already we see as barriers to this industry growing. This gene sequencing, getting together with molecular diagnostics. Over the last several months, or last 6 months, there's been a number of slashes in the Medicare reimbursement for molecular diagnostics tests. There's a battle going on between whether this is a cost basis or a value basis for these tests. And the tests are incredibly innovative. The improvements are very quickly, again, getting back to this exponential growth that you're getting with the semiconductor testing. And that is going to be a real problem. If it costs us a certain amount of money, or one of our other competitors a certain amount of money to put a test together, we sell it out and we don't get reimbursed for an amount that even covers the cost that we have, that's a very unsustainable business model. And if we can't get that fixed, that's going to make it very hard for this industry to grow. You may have heard about sequestration. We've been talking about it for about 3 years now. I remember the first time I heard the word, I was like, what the heck is that? And then it became very part of my everyday vernacular. But in all seriousness, our customers are researchers who are in labs or in pharmaceuticals or biotech. And these folks, when they rely much on the government and the NIH providing grants to them, and if they don't have grants, or if they get less amount of money in their grant, that's less work than they can do. And so we've seen the impact. We've seen researchers hold back money even ahead of sequestration, and now that it's actually been implemented, we're seeing fewer grants. You know, the NIH has been cut by 5%, and in some areas it's not equal, so some researchers get cut more than that. So I think it's imperative that we support full support for the NIH. We've seen it be successful in the past with the Human Genome Project, with the government supporting this, and if we don't continue to do that, I think that's going to continue to put the U.S. at a disadvantage. And it is absolutely true. What we've seen is countries like the UK and China and Israel, they have, whereas the U.S. is cutting funds to researchers from the government, they're doubling down, and in some places like the UK, actually increasing by twofold what they're giving to researchers. So I think from a competitive standpoint, that's going to put us at an extreme disadvantage. And we won't see it today, but we'll see it 5 years from now, and we'll see it from 10 years from now. When PhD candidates come out and they can't get grants, that's going to be a problem. So I think that those are key things that I would leave for you guys to think about, and we work through several of our coalitions, and we're happy to, my colleague Amy Mollberg and I, to talk to you about what LifeTech is doing, because I think the reimbursement issue and the support from the NIH are just critical issues for this industry to continue to be successful. And with that, I will turn it over.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm so pleased that so many folks did join us this morning. We were a little concerned. You know, I remember back when I was in grammar school, I heard the word recess. You know, all sorts of fancy things started dancing in my head. I was eager to get out on that playground, so thank you for coming this morning. It's a very important topic. I'm going to talk to you about a ground level use of the technology that Carol just outlined. The use of this type of sequencing technology and innovation to benefit cancer patients, so not only in the United States but worldwide. So the title of my talk is really about using the information in a way to improve the safety, efficacy, and affordability of cancer care in America. You know, we see all the time in the newspaper, you know, the press has really been hyping a lot of different advances in the field. And this whole notion of targeted treatment, where you can be more precise with the development and the use of medications to benefit patients, is very exciting, and it's having a profound impact in terms of improving patient outcomes. The important thing to note here is these things cost a lot of money. So we have to do a better job of innovating. To the Congressman's comments earlier, we have to be thoughtful about not only bringing more things that benefit patients to the table, but we have to be mindful of the costs associated with those. So I'll talk to you a little bit about both the clinical benefit of the approach that we're taking as well as some of the innovations around cost. When I typically start a discussion like this, I would ask the audience, who here has been impacted by cancer in some way? You might know somebody in your family, you might know somebody in your circle of friends or community, and sometimes, unfortunately, it's someone that's sitting in the audience. And typically everybody raises their hand. So it's an issue that impacts all Americans in some way. It's a life-threatening disease, obviously, but even if you're helping taking care of someone in your family or somebody that you know personally, it has an impact across the country. The company was founded in 2010, so we're a classic startup. One of the founders is Eric Lander, who was a key player in the Human Genome Project. He's now co-chair of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. So he and others that were leaders in the field of cancer genomics had this vision that we could do a lot better than what we're doing in terms of outcomes. We could also do a lot better in terms of managing the costs associated, the rising costs associated with cancer care in America. So the company was founded in 2010. We're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right on the edge of MIT. So people ask us all the time, well, why are you there? Why can't you be anywhere else? And there are certainly other centers of excellence in the country where we could recruit the type of expertise that we need. However, we're literally right on the edge of the MIT campus. And because of the bioinformatics skill sets that are required to take all of this information off a sequencing machine, interpret it in a way that it's actually helpful for a physician to take action in terms of treatment for a patient, we were really just recruiting the scientists right out of MIT to come there, and they want to live in Cambridge, and they want to stay in Cambridge. We could do the same thing in San Diego and other life sciences hubs across the country, but we've chosen to stay in Cambridge. The company is growing rapidly. We put on about 100 employees in the last 3 to 6 months. So it's not just us. If you look across the country, the number of jobs that have been created by the applications of next-gen sequencing in the clinic are extraordinary. All the major academic centers are bringing up this type of technology. They're bringing in new staff. Commercial entities are rising up as startups and are bringing on new staff. So to echo what Carol had shared in terms of the economic impact, it's tremendous, and we really need your support here. So we work with not only the cancer clinics across the United States, we do get business from 24 countries currently in different parts of the world. And this has largely been from word of mouth, that this is such a new way, a new novel way that has an impact, potential impact on patients, that it's been word of mouth. We really haven't had folks out talking to doctors or traveling to other parts of the world to generate this interest. But we've also attracted interest from pharmaceutical companies to work together on discovery and clinical trials work. So we're working together with the 16 leading oncology therapeutics companies worldwide using next-gen sequencing as part of their protocols with respect to drug discovery and clinical trials work for approval. That's taken us to the FDA. So we're now sitting down with the FDA in partnership with the pharma industry to look at new ways of building clinical trials and new ways of engaging the agency to speed the process of bringing life-saving medications to patients throughout the world. So our vision is really to look at cancer a different way. A lot of times when you think of cancer, it's breast cancer, it's leukemia, it's lymphoma, brain cancer, if you're thinking about a rare disease. But we're saying it's not where the disease starts, it's what's going on in the genes. The genes drive the cancer. So you can envision someday that we would have a shift from colon cancer to BRAF-altered cancer. And the BRAF gene being altered would have a list of targeted medications that potentially could be useful for that patient's treatment plan. That is a radical shift from how things are organized today. In addition, the current reimbursement schema and the way coverage has been designed is kind of a legacy environment that started back in the 80s. So the environment in terms of reimbursement and coverage for this type of a transformational shift is lagging behind 20, 25, 30 years. So an area of help with respect to legislative movement is in the area of moving the system and updating and modernizing the system to help innovation and encourage innovation to continue. So we believe that this transformation is essential to have the improvements in safety, efficacy, and affordability for cancer treatment on a going forward basis. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So if you think of cancer, this is a scary picture. You know, someone is sitting in a physician's office, they've had a scan, a PET scan, and this picture is metastatic disease. So the type of approach that we're offering is really for patients with metastatic disease, because typically in cancer, if you can catch it early, the prognosis is generally good. You can use standard surgery and radiation or maybe some cytotoxic therapies. But this is a metastatic patient. And boy, isn't it wonderful when this happens? So this is a patient that's been treated successfully. However, unfortunately, in too many cases, the disease comes back. So what is it about the disease that we don't know yet that is causing this recurrence? And why can't we do better to have more patients be that middle picture? We believe that it's driven by the genome. The changes in the genome and the pathway implications of those alterations in DNA are the drivers for this change and this transformation and the lack of treatment response, unfortunately, for many patients. So I'm going to tell you about a cancer patient. This is a case report that was published in the Journal of Thoracic Oncology. It was a patient who was young, a non-smoker, and had sat in front of their physician and been diagnosed with lung cancer. So the standard testing was done to figure out, are there some targeted treatments that we could perhaps offer to this patient. One of them was an FDA-approved test that's on the package insert for one of the medications, crizotinib, which is a Pfizer medication, and that came back negative. So the patient was started on cytotoxic therapy because if you look in the guidelines, that's all you have. And the patient was still, unfortunately, the disease was progressing. So the physician was in a big dilemma, therapeutic dilemma. It's a young person, non-smoker. The person, certainly could benefit from more treatment, but what do I do next? So the doctor, in this case, referred a sample to us, thinking that there must be something else driving this person's cancer. So we came back and we found, through sequencing, the power of sequencing, a new alteration that never had been described before in a similar gene to the one that was targeted using the crizotinib medication offered by Pfizer. So the physician said, well, it's not exactly what the approved biomarker was. It was a new novel translocation. Let me try crizotinib because this patient has no hope otherwise. So the patient was begun on crizotinib and had a durable response. And still to this day, even though the dates run only through 2012 in this particular report, when we've reported it in the journal, the patient still has a durable response on crizotinib. So the doctor never would have thought to test for alterations in that gene to the left or to the right of the one that was approved by the FDA. So this is an opportunity, certainly, and the FDA recognizes that this is an opportunity to think more broadly and more holistically about all types of DNA alterations as a way to organize treatment plans, drug discovery, et cetera. So this was published. We have hundreds of these cases. We find these every day. We have patients that are coming to us that are about to go into hospice, that we're finding novel alterations that never have been described before in the literature. Different medications are being used and the patients are having a response. We want to continue the work. We need the funding to continue the work. We need the reimbursement structure in the United States to continue funding this work because we believe we're going to continue to learn more. We're going to understand all of the different implications of different pathway changes, and hopefully at some point in the future we can transform cancer to more of a curative approach where patients are surviving and able to carry on in their lives more frequently than they are today. But we can't do that if we don't make some changes in the current structure of how we're organizing reimbursement. So cancer is a complex beast. I hope you're getting that picture. There's a lot going on in the body. It's not just one biomarker makes a change, we can treat it, shut it off, and fix it. There's a lot of moving parts. The cancer mutates during treatment. So it changes and it fights back. And that's why you see a lot of patients will recur later on in the progression of the treatment course. The power of next-gen sequencing enables us to unravel those secrets of what's driving the cancer. And that is a critical shift that we need your help to support and continue to bring this innovation to the clinic. This picture here on the left is just intended to demonstrate that a lot of times physicians think, oh, it's this type of cancer, I'm going to order this particular test. So a classic example of that is the HER2 gene, which corresponds to Herceptin use in breast cancer. So what we don't necessarily see in the clinic today is doctors thinking of HER2 mutations or overexpression in other types of cancers. So we see HER2 alterations showing up in 16 different cancers. Therefore, Herceptin potentially can be valuable for patients outside of the classic breast cancer diagnosis. And we've just published a number of different studies to that effect at the recent ASCO meeting in this past June. So this is exciting news for patients who otherwise didn't have hope. So here's kind of the classic picture. In 2003, if you had a diagnosis of lung adenocarcinoma, that was it. It was kind of a standard treatment. It was a shotgun approach, trial and error. Patients didn't typically do well in lung cancer. Now today we have all of these different known biomarkers associated with targeted treatments and or clinical trials in process. To the Congressman's point, if we try to do all of those tests individually using current technologies like PCR, you're talking about a $10,000 to $12,000 bill to run those assays individually on a piece of tissue. Today, with the power of next-gen sequencing, we can do that, all of that work, and plus much, much more for about half of what that cost us. Because it's about discovering all of the types of alterations, not just these. The pie chart you're going to see, if I came back and gave this presentation in 6 months, there'd be 25 slices in that pie chart because it's moving so quickly based on the discovery. So we're looking for both common alterations and hidden alterations. So next-gen sequencing, again, it allows you to really go deep and to figure out all of the different nuances and all the slight little changes that could correspond to a targeted medication that's available on the market or one that's in a clinical trial. So it's important that when a patient presents with metastatic disease, you get the answer to the doctor as quickly as possible, and you offer a comprehensive approach so you can get them lined up on the right treatment as early as possible in the course of the disease. One of the big areas of discussion now is waste. Big focus, governmental efforts in terms of reducing waste. You think of all the trial and error that goes on in cancer. It's an enormous amount of dollars that are wasted in the system. So a more precise means of organizing diagnosis and treatment is essential for cancer care to be affordable going forward. And we think that this is going to lead to combination therapies like you've seen with HIV, for example. In HIV, we use combination therapy, and it's taken that disease from deadly to chronic. You know, people are living with HIV now through the miracle of using genotyping to figure out what was going on at a molecular level and organizing combination therapy approaches to shut off all the different mechanisms to outsmart the disease. And that's where the vision is going forward. Next-gen sequencing helps make that possible. The number of drugs in the pipeline is tremendous. There's a wave coming of targeted therapies. Doctors are excited, but they're also, they also can't keep up. So by having next-gen sequencing and the ability to do all that work for them, we organize and let them know about the current advances in the literature worldwide on a daily basis through the use of the tests that we have. They don't have to think of what tests should I be ordering. We'll bring that right to them. We'll constantly morph our tests to reflect the current evidence. So today we're looking at 236 genes. Tomorrow we'll look at 285. Next year, 312, all based on looking at the evidence and making sure that our test remains current with that evidence base. And just to get to the wrap up, the goal line is really about saving lives. So if you look at the tremendous improvements that we've been able to make in survival in the hematologic diseases, using the ability to subset the disease based on molecular characteristics, this is just the beginning. This is one piece of cancer. We could have the same kind of diagram for the solid tumors like breast and colon. So where do we need your help? I think overall, I mentioned some areas of opportunity. Coding, coverage, and payment. The system needs to be updated. Now, legislatively, we can do things that will hinder innovation, or we can choose to sit down, multi-stakeholder and have discussions about what we can do to drive innovation and make it affordable and make it efficient across the United States. So we've mentioned some things here, but I wanted to point out that we are part of a number of coalitions, as is Life Technologies. One of them is the Coalition for 21st Century Medicine, which is an organized group of innovators in diagnostics, advanced diagnostics. And we are currently working to build a proposal. We've been out on the Hill, not me personally, but others, but out on the Hill talking about different ways of thinking about coding, coverage, and reimbursement in order to create a framework that will enable these innovations to continue, enable these kinds of opportunities for patients to continue. And we would ask, and we would enjoy the opportunity as the C21 group to meet with you to talk further about that. Thank you.
So thank you for coming. We have time for a few questions, and then we can adjourn. But if there are any, just raise your hand, and we'll try to get a few done before we end. All right, Priscilla.
So, for example, the 42-year-old that has lung cancer, and you said the doctor sent him to get the test done. Is that something that he paid for himself or the insurance company paid for? So I'm trying to figure out broader, like what kind of coverage is there for this, or is it all out-of-pocket cost for the patient?
That's a great question. So, and I don't know the particulars of that person's case, but generally in our experience, we've had a mix. So we've had patients from all over the world call and say, I don't care. I need to get this because for myself or my family. I don't care what the coverage is. But we've had pretty good response from the insurance market in the United States for coverage. You have to recognize that these patients are metastatic. They've exhausted, first line, second line treatment usually. They've exhausted the NCCN guidelines that are typical. They're out of hope. So in terms of taking the information that we provide on the report, what we do is we provide that back to the insurance company in conjunction with input from the physician on the clinical situation of the patient, and we've been very successful in basically having a validated way and a scientific approach to justifying why these medications should be used. Because otherwise what happens is physicians will use trial and error. They'll just take a medication and try it, which is much less imprecise.
I think we've even found on sequencing, so for next generation sequencing, we've met with some physicians, are these working?
Yeah.
Okay, some with physicians who are, like for example, doing tests if you might have a child who's sick and they don't know what's wrong. So they want to do some sort of panel where they look at what could most likely be the case, and that test might be $3,000. And some insurance companies will pay for it, other insurance companies won't pay for it. Depending on what your economic situation is, $3,000 might be something that you can pay for out of pocket, and it might be something that is way out of reach for what you can do. And again, I think if you go back to if we can get some certainty around some of these things, it would just be very helpful, because that $3,000 test may save the system, just exponentially more money than that. And obviously the patient.
People that can't afford it, they don't have access to this.
Absolutely, right. You don't want the haves and have-nots.
Right.
Yeah, so it's important that all Americans have access, right?
Yeah.
So, a number of people in the industry are hesitant to engage the underserved because of the uncertainty of reimbursement. In our view, we are engaged. We have submitted 50 applications to all the state Medicaid agencies. We want to make sure that we're active in the health exchanges. We want to make sure that everybody can get access to this equally.
Thank you.
Another one.
Is all of your congressional funding for research coming through the NIH? Is that the main pathway, or are there other pathways?
Many of our customers, their ability to do the work that they're doing. So that breakthrough work is coming from NIH. Where it doesn't come from NIH, it's going to need to come from a private foundation. So there are a number of private foundations. It could come from a company, but the vast majority of that will come from the federal government in one way or the other.
Yeah, and our model, we're venture capital funded and individual philanthropic sources as well. And one of the challenges that people in our space are facing now is that the reimbursement environment is so uncertain that the VC community is hesitant to invest. And that's an area of opportunity for us to work together to figure out how we can make the environment more certain. It's never going to be completely certain, but it has to be more easy to understand than it is now. Most of our board of directors are from the pharma world, and they don't understand the complexities and all the moving parts of the diagnostic industry. And even for me, who've been in it for 25 years, every day's a new day. There's something confounding us. So that's an area of opportunity legislatively to work together towards a more certain or more prescriptive environment in terms of, so we know what the roadmap is, we know what the path is.
What's the one over here?
I had a question regarding liability, since this is all sort of new research or just trying to see. I mean, it looks much more targeted and certain because you're looking at the genes. But over here, I know in the United States, there's a lot of liability. And what if there's an error? Like, is there a really high cost in it? Because, I mean, I like the experimentation part, but I know that some doctors are really scared for being liable for a new treatment that hasn't been used before. So, like, how does that apply to the experiments that you do?
Well, I'm not
does it apply at all?
Yeah, I'm no expert in this area. So, I mean, if you think about what goes on today, the trial and error in cancer is mainstream. It's how it's done because the disease is constantly battling us, and it's difficult to figure out. So this is a more precise way of saying, well, this is why we're choosing this off-label medication or this particular clinical trial than has been used previously. So how does that rub up against liability? I'm not certain of all the different implications because I don't have expertise in that, but it's a very good question.
But anyway, isn't what you guys do after things have failed, right? I mean, if you're going through the regular treatment and everything's working, then you don't need to do anything
That's
else.
right.
So really, I mean, what you're trying to do is fix something that's not working. So I think liability would be less of an issue.
You had one up here in the middle. Did you have one or?
Oh yeah, you
And then-
mentioned about 3 slides back about making the peer review research process to patient more efficient. And how does the FDA relate to that? I know one of you mentioned the FDA. How do they inhibit the efficiency of that?
Yeah, so just in the research environment, the ecosystem, if you will, there's this notion of real-world trials where we're getting data faster because we're sharing it. So the FDA and many others across the country are interested in models that can take the daily learnings that each individual practice may have and rolling that up into information that's available in real time to see, yes, we identified today a new alteration. We had 15 patients by next week that have been treated this way. We're seeing a tremendous response in terms of reduction in disease burden. Let's get that information available in a way that we can use it faster, because the current pace, as we all recognize, is too slow. And in fact, the European market is taking more of this kind of approach, and you're seeing the outcome of that in terms of approvals faster, where medications that we think the Americans should have first, the Europeans are outpacing us.
Okay, one in the back and then one more.
Okay, so when cancer patients don't respond well to treatment, doctors do cycle through a pretty expensive potential treatments. And so do you have any sort of estimate on how much money is being saved when they do the genetic testing first to target a specific treatment?
Another great question. So we're working with several organizations, closed integrated systems, to understand the health economic impacts of those types of questions. I don't have those answers today. So the idea is, in the theoretical models, we work with some folks at Stanford to develop theoretical models, by using the testing earlier when a metastatic patient presents at diagnosis. You should be able to reduce the amount of cytotoxics that are used, and the cytotoxic chemotherapies that are used typically have adverse events associated with them, which result in hospitalizations and other very high cost implications. So having a targeted treatment approach earlier where it makes sense and where you have the alterations on the theoretical side works in the model. We're now in the process of proving it in clinical trials.
We have one over there and then finish up.
I was hoping that you could speak a little bit more about what kind of things we could do to sort of fix this coverage and reimbursement issue.
So, you know, there's some legislative proposals that are out there. And one of the things that we're sensing is that there's not a clear path to getting even a code for the things that we bring to the table. There are, you know, hundreds of different definitions with respect to the clinical utility trials that one must run to, you know, figure out whether something could be covered. And then the payment methodology, as I referenced earlier, you know, is kind of harkens back to 1984 when the original RVU system was developed, and it hasn't been changed since. So that needs to be updated. So basically what we're suggesting is let's sit down and figure out a new playbook that enables innovation to occur. We should be able to get a code and at least establish what the payment is going to look like early in the process so investors can feel more comfortable that of making those investments and continuing the research. And then we can work on, you know, what are the rules of the road? What's the path towards coverage? What clinical trials do you need to use? And if others want to follow you, you know, what is the rules of the road in terms of following an innovation and making sure that you're doing the clinical trials the same way, and we're all comfortable that this is safe, efficacious, and affordable.
Last question right there.
Hi, I'm with BD, and you mentioned FDA-approved diagnostics and non-FDA-approved diagnostics. Have you had any success in reaching out to the FDA to talk about how they might facilitate the approval of some of these currently non-approved diagnostics to allow this new technology to come to market faster?
That's not my world. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, but we have had discussions. You know, this whole, there's a movement towards something called a master protocol, and, you know, this whole notion of breakthrough and being able to move up the pace. So the FDA has become much more open-minded in having conversations with industry about what needs to happen to make that a reality so we can speed these life-saving medications to the marketplace.
Well, thank you all again for coming out. I want to especially thank you. I know sometimes when you work on the Hill, you don't get to see the real-life benefits of what you're doing. And I think with what we've talked about today, if we can help drive innovation forward in healthcare, we can really start seeing more and more change where lives are lasting longer and people are living longer because of some of these great technologies that are coming forward. And it's exciting for you all to be involved in that opportunity. So thank you for your time. Enjoy your recess, and we're adjourned.